There's a shot Malcolm in the middle returns to constantly. Malcolm alone, looking straight into the camera, explaining why whatever he's doing makes perfect sense. Then Lois walks in and ruins it. At least, that's how we remember it. We laughed with him. We rolled our eyes with him. We fell for the same trap over and over again. Mom shows up, presents herself as the problem, start the theme song. One of the show's tropes was that Lois was rarely around when the damage happened. She walked in after something had already been burned, broken, or lied about, but by then, the boys had already had their fun. Malcolm got to explain himself, Lois got to react. And that taught us to blame the person responding to the chaos instead of the people who created it. There's one episode that makes the whole trick visible. It's Lois and Hal's anniversary. Lois has a new dress for dinner, and when she goes to put it on, she finds it burned and stuffed in the toilet. She doesn't investigate, she doesn't ask a single question. She assumes the boys did it, and while Hal waits at the restaurant, she goes to war. Toys disappear, the boys get spun around baseball bats until they're too dizzy to keep their stories straight. They get sent to the wall and moved closer together every time they whisper, trying to build an alibi for something they didn't do. One of them gives the most obvious defense possible. We didn't do it. It doesn't matter. In this house, denial has never counted as proof of innocence. Meanwhile, Hal is at the restaurant alone, charming the waitstaff and having a genuinely lovely evening, completely unaware that Lois is running a full interrogation over something he did. Years later, the show finally reveals the truth. Hal burned the dress. The boys were innocent the entire time. They were simply the people Lois had already learned to suspect first. But by the end of the original episode, who burned the dress barely matters. What we remember is Lois trying to force a confession out of 3 kids who don't have one to give. The truth arrives years late. Her reaction gets there on time. So her reaction becomes the story. Once you notice that, you start seeing it everywhere. We inherited that version of Lois from Malcolm, because Malcolm is the only one who gets the camera. Not Hal, not Reese, and for most of the series, not Lois. Every episode, Malcolm gets to pull us aside before anyone else can speak. He explains the scheme, the grievance, and why his mother's response is completely unreasonable. By the time Lois walks into a room, we're already on his side. The show needs her to enter that way because the show needs us to see her as the bad one. The boys' chaos is funny while it's happening. A fire is a gag until someone has to replace what burned. A flood is fun until someone has to clean it. A stolen bag of something they should never have touched is harmless until the bill arrives. The pattern is clear. The second somebody has to mop the floor, replace what broke, or explain the bill, it stops being the boys' adventure and becomes Lois's problem. So Lois enters right before the fun turns it into responsibility. She raises her voice. She ends the scene. She becomes the face of the consequence, even when she has nothing to do with creating it. The writers didn't hate Lois. The family needed someone to deal with what happens after the jokes, and she was almost always the person doing it. That's also why Hal gets remembered as the better parent. Not because he's harmless. Hal has his own rage, his selfishness, and disasters across 7 seasons. But his mistakes usually explode in the moment and disappear by the next scene. Lois's punishments linger, so his failures feel like comedy, while hers start to feel like personality. The bowling episode makes that difference impossible to miss. It's built like sliding doors, giving us 2 versions of the same night. Dewey is grounded for killing the neighbor's parakeet. In one version, Hal stays home with him, in the other, Lois does. This duality is presented to us in a very strategic way. Hal sits down to read Dewey a bedtime story and falls asleep halfway through it. Dewey immediately orders a pizza and settles in to watch whatever he's not supposed to be watching. No one is enforcing anything. It's just a kid enjoying an unsupervised night. In Lois's version, the punishment remains a punishment. No pizza, no staying up. She eventually allows television, but only C-SPAN, which is a perfect little joke about exactly how much freedom Dewey has earned. Hal gets to be the fun parent because Lois is already doing the part that makes children angry. Same grounded kid, same house. Put us beside Hal and the night feels like freedom. Put us beside Lois and it feels like prison. The rule never changed, our seat did. The episode isn't really asking which parent is better. It's asking which parent we choose if nobody ever had to wake up tomorrow and deal with the consequences. Of course, we choose Hal. Everyone else gets to experience chaos as freedom. Lois sees the mess waiting on the other side of it. Hal gets tonight. Lois gets tomorrow morning. Repeat that for enough episodes and it stops sounding like a compliment about her and starts sounding like her job. But the show doesn't just stop at proving Lois is necessary. It also asks what doing that job for years has done to her. Lois gets arrested over a pile of unpaid parking tickets that actually belong to Frances, who drove under her name without telling anyone. She's furious, convinced the police officer had it out for her, and pushes the whole thing towards a lawsuit instead of paying the tickets and moving on. Then the family finds security footage from the parking lot. From that angle, Lois appears to be a reckless driver. Hal finally sits her down and says what nobody in this house has dared to say. In 20 years, she has never admitted she was wrong about anything. Maybe this is the time. And for one night, she does it. Lois watches the tape and lets the case go. Then Craig finds another camera angle. Hal and the boys watch it together. It shows the other driver making an illegal U-turn seconds before Lois passed. Turns out, she wasn't reckless. She was right the entire time. The first camera simply didn't show enough. But they don't tell her. Instead, they destroy the evidence. Because they know exactly what happens if Lois ever finds out she was right. The version of her that just spent one evening accepting she might be wrong would disappear. With the burned dress, the truth arrived too late to change how we saw her. Here, the family finds the truth and buries it themselves. This isn't only a joke about a mother who can't lose an argument. Lois has spent years being the person who notices what everyone else ignores and deals with what everyone else leaves behind. Eventually, when someone disagrees with her, she doesn't hear another opinion. She hears one more person refusing to see the problem she can already see. And notice who protects that certainty in the end. Not Lois. Hal and the boys decide, without her, that the family is better off if she never learns the truth. Lois is usually right that somebody made the mess, somebody broke the rule, and somebody has to deal with it. Where she goes wrong is deciding she should always be the one who chooses what happens next. Understanding why Lois became so certain leaves one more question. What happens when she stops? There's an episode called Funeral built around a great-aunt's death that nobody in the house wants to attend. Malcolm wants to go to a concert with a girl he likes. Reese is hiding a birthday present he destroyed and plans to bury it in the coffin. Hal would rather stay home with his records than write a eulogy. Somewhere in the argument, Lois gives up. Nobody has to do anything they don't want to do anymore. She's taken a bubble bath. They can all handle themselves. For a few minutes, it looks like relief. But then the house starts filling up with things nobody bothers to fix. Reese kicks over a trash can and leaves it lying in the walkway. Hal runs a stereo cord across the floor and walks away from it. Dewey empties an entire bottle of liquid soap across the kitchen tile and leaves it there. By the time Malcolm's date arrives, the path through the house is already waiting for her. Normally, Lois would clean up each mess almost immediately. This time, she doesn't. Which also means nobody does. So when Malcolm's date arrives, on her way out, she trips over Hal's cord, lands in Dewey's soap, and slides straight into Reese's trash can in front of the whole family. She leaves and never speaks to Malcolm again. None of those mistakes mattered by themselves. They only became a disaster because nobody stopped the first one, or the second one, or the third one. Lois's absence doesn't create freedom. It lets 3 small messes sit long enough to become one humiliating ending. There's a shot afterward of the family spread around the living room, not speaking to each other. Lois drinks her tea, Hal works on a bowl of Jell-O, Reese repairs his hockey stick, Dewey sits by himself in the corner. Nobody's yelling, nobody's fixing anything. It takes Malcolm feeling genuinely guilty about the girl before anyone speaks again. Lois wasn't ruining the day. She was usually stopping this exact ending before anyone else had to see it. Then the finale takes the same argument out of the kitchen and puts it on Malcolm's entire future. Malcolm is a valedictorian. He's been accepted to Harvard. The family's still trying to cover what his scholarships won't when a lucrative software job lands in his lap. Real money, immediately. No loans, no years of sweeping floors and scraping together tuition. It's the easiest exit this family has ever been offered. Malcolm points out that taking the job wouldn't have ended his long-term ambitions. He can make the money now and follow his dreams later in life. Lois considered that. She and Hal discussed it and decided against it. Not because Malcolm couldn't succeed that way, but because she believes success would come too easily. In her mind, Malcolm still hasn't struggled enough. He reminds her that struggle is practically the only thing he's ever known. Lois doesn't budge. Malcolm tells her he's been suffering his entire life. Lois tells him it still isn't enough. Now he's gonna sweep the floors and work twice as hard as everyone around him because she believes that's the only path that could turn him into the kind of man who should run the country. Lois may be right that hardship will keep Malcolm connected to people who never get an easy exit, but she is still choosing his hardship for him. The instincts that kept his family afloat are now being used to steer Malcolm's entire life. Lois sees the shortcut, decides it will ruin him, and removes it without him getting a vote. The show never resolves that contradiction, doesn't tell us which half of Lois is correct. It lets both halves remain true. She sees the price before everyone else does, so she rarely trusts anyone else to decide whether it should be paid. It's the same certainty Hal and the boys protected when they destroyed the second tape. The same instinct that held Dewey's punishment steady while Hal quietly folded. The same need to control the outcome that began with a burned dress and 3 innocent boys. Only now, it's aimed at the person she loves most, in the moment when the stakes are finally big enough to shape an entire life. That's the whole shape of Lois, all the way to the end. Right about the cost, never quite willing to let anyone else decide how it gets paid. Every episode began the same way. Malcolm looked into the camera, Lois walked into the room. One of them told us life was unfair, the other one quietly proved it. Maybe that's why Lois feels so different when we watch the show now. As kids, we saw the parent who kept ruining the fun. As adults, we can finally see the person who knew the fun always left something behind. That's what we do here on Millennial Rewind. We go back to the shows we grew up with and look at what we were too young to notice the first time. Subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. In the meantime, thank you so much for watching, and take care of yourself.